Welcome back to Old Stuff is Better. Old Stuff is Better. This is Falcon build part 3. So what I'm going to do today is remove the steering, the front spindles, things like that. Now, you don't have to remove the front spindles if you're going to leave it a 4-lug car, which I would strongly recommend not. Then you could leave all of the stuff on, but you do have to remove the steering. The steering gear, unfortunately, gets in the way of the engine. How Ford did this was they had the rear end of the car slightly tilted up on the assembly line, and then they had the engine and transmission as one unit, transmission first and then down into the car. Okay, so the steering gear was put in last. It was the tie rods and everything like that. The steering box was in. So another thing we're going to do is when we get the engine out, we're going to go ahead, the engine and transmission, we're going to go ahead and pull the steering box out and put the new steering box from the 65 in. That's all going to go in because it's a column shift automatic. The steering box, by the way, from the 65 is slightly shorter. It's about an inch shorter, which will actually work better because it'll get the steering wheel out of your lap. And that's nice. We have a 63 convertible, and that's one thing that I hate is that the steering wheel is not only my lap, feels like it's in my chest. I just can't get the seat back far enough in my convertible. Anyway, so today we're going to go ahead and remove the spindles, drums, and steering linkage, get that all out of the way, and then Saturday we're going to go ahead and pull the engine and transmission. The 65 Comet that's still sitting over there has the power steering in it. The 65 steering is what you want, and I'll put a side-by-side comparison between the two. Sorry about the heater again, it's going on and off. The 65 the 65 steering was the way to go. The earlier steering systems created kind of a bump steer when you were going around corners and hitting a bump. It wasn't the best thing, and you'll see why. A lot of you who are really into Falcons, you know this. So we're going to convert everything over. The upper control arms and lower control arms are virtually the same. And another thing that we'll show you too is that the strut rods for the lower control arm coming up to the body on the 63 are adjustable, which is really good because I hate aligning these things. I hate aligning these things with a passion because the shims and the upper control arms and everything. So if you can get by with just having to do camber, that's fine. But if you have to do caster also, then you can adjust them with the strut rods. The 65 over there, the strut rods have a stop on them, and you just tighten them down, and then that's it. And then you have to do all the alignment from the upper control arm. So anyway, let's just go ahead and get started. We'll crawl underneath the car. We're going to be doing this 63 the way most of you would be doing, without a lift. This is an operational shop. I cannot tie up a lift for several months, and that would be stupid. So we're going to be doing this on the floor the way most of you would be doing it at home. So join me and we'll crawl underneath the car. Okay, so here is the strut rod, and you can see that it's threaded on both ends. So you can move it forward and back to set your caster. And so I've already gone ahead and removed all of the cotter pins, which was kind of weird pulling the cotter pins out of a car that's a year older than I am. Those cotter pins have never been out. This has only got 68,000 miles on it. It's muddy. It was originally a Kansas car, and I went to California for a short period of time. But anyway, I'll show you the steering here. Get a light under here. So the big problem with the 63 steering is you see how the tie rods are mounted. You got the center link here, and then you got the tie rods coming up and mounting in here. The 65 is entirely different. I don't remember how it's mounted, but I believe that the tie rods are mounted outboard. I think it's outboard here. The tie rod, the center link goes farther out. I can't remember. Anyway, we'll be changing everything over. So we're going to take off the spindles, drums, leave the lower control arms, leave the upper control arms, and unfortunately, in the Comet, somebody in California decided that cutting a coil off of the Comet springs was a good idea. So we're going to end up having to buy brand new springs. Not a bad idea anyway. But and also we're going to be so the V8 motor mounts will bolt on here. We'll just take these off, these 3 bolts here. Then there's the 6-cylinder mounts. They'll come off, and then that'll allow us to be able to bolt on a cross member on the back side here that will come down underneath the engine, and it'll strengthen both frame rails here because there's nothing here. Ford, this is precursor to a Pinto, I think. So anyway, so that's what we're going to be doing here. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of taking things apart because you can figure that out yourself. But we'll show you when everything's on the ground, and we'll just kind of go from there. So take that. Oh, well, one thing that we also did too is we removed the sway bar. Now, interesting that we found was this 6-cylinder Falcon had a larger diameter sway bar than the 65 Comet, which we thought was really unusual. And I'll put the two side by side so that you can see them, but the Falcon sway bar is actually a larger diameter than the Comet. Anyway, we'll be back as soon as I get this all apart. Okay, one thing I wanted to point out here was to get the tie rods off, it's not that hard, but you don't want to ruin them. So, see, I put the nut back on again after I got it off. Good thing to do is to not hit it with a brass hammer. Don't hit it with a normal hammer, you'll ruin the threads. I put the hammer on there, and then I smack the brass hammer with a sledge. Just kind of like, you know, and so the sledge, the brass hammer is going to just knock that out there without ruining the threads. If you're, okay, for the 65, we're going to be taking that apart. We definitely want to be able to save the threads. Now, I also wanted to point out something too, that the lower control arm is now down too low to be able to take the spindle off, because the lower control arm and the upper control arm are down too low. So we're going to go ahead and take the shocks off. There's 2 nuts on the bottom of the shock. This has got new shocks in it, so that's nice. And so we'll take the shocks out. You do that by taking those 2 nuts off, and then many of you who have Falcons know this, or Mavericks or Comets or on and on and on and on, Granadas and so on. You take those 3 bolts off here, and then just lift this whole thing out of here. There's a special tool, which, believe it or not, we've had since, wow, the 70s, that actually sits on the top of here with jaws that clamp onto the spring. Pull the spring up, and then that way the spring is compressed and you can get the upper control arm out, which is what we want to do, because we're going to do a Shelby drop on that too, so we'll do a video on that also. Anyway, I wanted to point that out, and when we do this, I'll put this tool in here and I'll show you how it works. You can do it with other things, but just remember, a compressed spring is dangerous, so you want to use the proper tool. So we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, here's the nuts that go on the bottom of the shock, and nuts and special washers. Now, this person didn't put the rubber washer in, so I'll have to come up with those. But they go on the bottom of the shock. Took those off, take the shock tower off, and then the whole thing just comes out top. So that's how you do that. And then we'll use our tool here in a minute and scrunch up the spring. Now, I wanted to point out that these bolts are special little carriage bolts here, special bolts. They go in there, and they've got a kind of a hex on the bottom there to fit in that slot. Don't lose these. In fact, we're just going to go ahead and take them out, because we're going to wash up the engine compartment and I don't want them falling out. So we'll be back. Here's the tool. So this goes on top of the fender well like that. What happens is, I've got a bronze bushing here, so that when you're tightening things down, it doesn't get stuck. You can't buy quality tools like this anymore. It just don't exist. Anything coming from China is not. In fact, anything coming from China, I don't know if I would trust this or these hooks. But what happens is, this drops down into the hole, and you hook the hooks onto the spring, and then just suck the spring up and collapse it. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here, get that in there so you can see. We'll go ahead and collapse the spring. Okay, so there it is in place. Now I went ahead and put grease on the surfaces of all the washers, including the brace that goes right there. So anyway, I'll show you what happens here. So now the 2 jaws are going to suck the spring up, and we don't want to leave that spring compressed working around there, because, like I said, a spring is a gun waiting to go off by itself. Fortunately, guns don't go off by themselves, but that's another topic. But a coiled spring is very dangerous. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to compress it, and then we're going to let it down slowly, and then we'll make it come out the one side or another there, and we'll just remove the spring. We're not going to use these anyway. They're 6-cylinder springs, and we're going to be putting V8 springs in. So let me go ahead and remove that. We'll show you how that goes. Okay, so the spring is out now. I am having a difficult time getting these ball joints popped loose, and I don't want to hurt the threads, because the ball joints are feeling very good. Remember, they've only got 68,000 miles on this, and they feel very good. So, and they are greasable, and people have been greasing them. So I'm going to go ahead and take the strut rod out, take that loose, take the lower control arm and the upper control arm, and we'll take them all out with a spindle. We'll separate them that way. All right, so I've been working on this for about an hour on the side, and this is including all the video time and everything like that too. Remember, I do this for a living, and I've done a lot of these before. So anyway, that is, get the light up in there. That's what it looks like without the suspension. Now they still got the strut rod in there. We got to pull the strut rod out, the bushings are shot. Something interesting that I noticed was that the spring perch mount has a grease fitting right there. That's a plug. So we'll take that plug out, put a grease fitting in there. It feels great. Also, these feel nice and tight, which is great. It just proves that this car actually does have 68,000 miles on it. Everything is really, really good. So anyway, that's it for pulling the suspension out. We're gonna go ahead and drill and put the Shelby drop, do that, and that, for anybody that doesn't know what a Shelby drop is, that is, if I get my light up in there, that's moving the holes down to about here, and we got a special plate that will bolt onto there, and we'll drill the holes, and that lowers the control arm down. What it does, look up Shelby drop on YouTube here, and you'll see all the explanations of why you should have done it, why Henry Ford should have done it. The engineers wanted him to do it, and he was an interesting man, very stubborn, and didn't want to do things the way the engineers wanted to do it. So, but it does make the vehicle ride better, steer better, go over bumps better, and that's what we're going to do. So anyway, that's kind of it for today. Just wanted to bring you guys an update. All right, last video for the day. We got everything out, and you know, it really doesn't take that long. There's not too much to these things. There's the stuff that we're keeping on the left side, and then there's the exhaust. That'll go with the engine, wheels, and tires. There's everything from the front end that is going. And like I said, that sway bar is actually a larger diameter than the Comet. I'll measure them and show you. Springs, they're going. Brand new drums. Pretty happy about that. Maybe somebody can use them. And actually the steering is really tight, so hoping somebody can use that. Hate to throw that all away. New rear drums, and then there's the stuff for the right side. So that's all the keeper stuff. So get new bushings for the rod going from the frame to the lower control arm. And so now everything is, all we got to do is just unbolt the cross member, take the shift linkage from the 3-speed and unhook that, and the motor mounts, and out she comes. So yeah, we'll tune you in when we get to that. We're going to work on that this upcoming Saturday, and so yeah, it'll come along. We'll get everything stripped. We're not going to get the 289 in. We'll get everything tore apart this weekend and then call it a day. Sometime next month, we're going to put the whole thing together as much as we can in a day. So thanks for joining me, and this is Old Stuff is Better for Falcon Build video number 3.